Alright guys, so today I wanted to talk about the Lollipop Chainsaw Remaster, since I haven't talked about this game since it was first announced actually, which was all the way back in 2022, I believe, which I actually didn't realize it had been that long. But this game was originally supposed to come out last year and it ended up getting delayed, but it is coming out this year, pretty soon in fact. And they have dropped a few trailers for it, and they got the website up, and they've given us quite a bit more information about it. So I thought I'd go through all that here today. It is a little bit of a mixed bag, but we'll cover what we do know. So this game has been named Lollipop Chainsaw Repop. And I guess up front I'll just address the thing that's at the forefront of everyone's mind, which is, will this game be censored? And it appears, based on what we've seen so far at least, that it will not be censored in any way. Post-release patches notwithstanding. We've seen a few examples of that bullshit in recent years. But based on the stuff they've shown and all the promotional materials and everything, there have been no signs of censorship from what they have shown. They did put up an image showing all of the costumes in the game, which there are 30 costumes in total this time, and all the costumes that are returning from the first game do appear to look exactly the same as they did in the first game. The seashell bikini is there, intact, and nothing seems to be altered, at least from what we can tell. Now, I mentioned this in my first video I made about this game. A few of the costumes from the original release were crossover costumes from a few animes and things, High School of the Dead and a few others. And as expected, all of those costumes are not going to be returning in this game, probably for licensing reasons. But those handful of costumes have been removed, but they have replaced them with new original costumes that were not in the original release of the game. All of which do look pretty good, again, based on what little we've seen of them. So that is cool that we're getting new costumes. I don't have the exact number of costumes that were in the original release in front of me. I do believe it was slightly less than 30. So I think we're actually getting more costumes in this version than we had in the original, despite the crossover costumes not being here. So as far as the costume department goes, it's probably the absolute best you could hope for, given the situation. So all that seems to work out pretty well. Now, speaking of licensing issues, the other big thing that is a huge change in this game is the soundtrack. Now, we knew about this before because they actually did address this, at least partially, up front when they first announced the game. But, of course, the game originally had quite a few licensed songs in the soundtrack, and they said that most of those songs would not be returning for this release. Now, we still don't totally know which ones are going to be here and which ones aren't. However, there is one little note on the official website, which I'll link in the description. They mentioned that there is going to be a streamer mode for the game, so people can stream the game without getting dinged with copyright bullshit, I guess. And they said that streamer mode is going to replace the song Lollipop by the Chordettes with an original track. And Lollipop is actually the only song that is mentioned under the streamer mode section. So to me that implies that Lollipop might be the only licensed song in the game, because you would think if there were more, then streamer mode would have to replace them as well, but it specifically only mentions that one. So if Lollipop is the only song that survived, then that definitely really sucks. The soundtrack for the original game just added so much to the atmosphere of the game that, to me at least, this is a huge blow and probably my biggest issue with this remaster, based on what we know so far. So it really sucks. I understand that, it's a budget situation. Dragami Games is independent. They don't have, WB Games backing them like they did with the original release. So obviously they're not going to have the budget to pay for all these song license. I understand the situation, but it does just really suck if it worked out where they could only end up getting one song out of all the originals. So beyond that, they have detailed a lot of the changes to the actual game itself. Of course, there is a obvious graphical improvement, better resolution, better frame rate, the typical fare you would expect from something like this. And based on the trailers, it does look fine to me. Again, I'm not a huge graphics person, so I'm not really invested in that one way or another. But based on what we've seen, it does look like an improvement over the original graphics. Now, another thing they mentioned that they are adding is a repop mode, which is an optional mode in the game that basically just removes all of the gore and replaces it with like pop art effects that are a lot less violent. Now, I do know that the original release of the game, at least in Japan, actually had 2 different versions with different Sero ratings, since the Sero board in Japan is a lot more sensitive to violence than the ESRB would be. So they actually released 2 different versions of the game, one of which I think was a Sero D rated version that actually did have the violence toned down, and then the other was a Sero Z rated release that was basically identical to the Western version. So this repop mode does sound very reminiscent of that to me. As for me personally, I don't really see a point in this repop mode. I guess if you're a Japanese player and you originally played the Sero D version and you want the less violence for nostalgia or something, I don't know. I don't really see a point of having less violence in a game like this. It's not like toning down the violence a little bit suddenly makes it a kid-friendly game and, you can play it while your children are watching or something. So it's one of those things where I just don't see the point. It is optional, so it doesn't really affect anything, but I don't really see any merit in having this mode included at all. Speaking of optional things with very little merit, they also mentioned that all of the QuickTime events in the game are going to have an option to just have them play automatically, so you don't actually have to time out your button presses, which I'm definitely not a big fan of QuickTime events, but this whole thing just kind of screams like game journalist bitch mode to me. So again, I see no merit in adding this whatsoever. Again, it's totally optional, so it doesn't affect anything. You can just turn it off, but this just doesn't appeal to me. So beyond that, they did add a few little neat features that do seem like something I would be more interested in. They are adding a time attack mode, so that's neat, especially if you're into that sort of thing. It lets you marathon all the levels in the game in a row and post your time to a leaderboard at the end. Additionally, they are adding a few different hair color options for Juliet, so another little layer of customization on top of just the outfits. You can change her hair color independently from her outfit, so you can do different combinations there, so that's pretty cool. They give you 4 different colors to pick from, beyond just her original blonde color. They're also adding a few different chainsaws you can get in this game, which all of them are basically just recolors of the chainsaw we have to begin with. But beyond just aesthetic differences, these different chainsaws actually do affect the gameplay. Each one has a different ability that affects, what kind of metals you get as you kill zombies or various things like that. So that is another cool little thing added to the game. Now, beyond that, the official site does list a handful of little gameplay tweaks. Again, the link to the site will be in the description. I'm not going to go through every single one of these individually. A lot of them are just talking about, the speed of the gameplay and, tweaks to the camera and stuff like that. So all of them sound fine on paper, but most of them are things that you kind of got to feel in action to really, be able to tell the difference there. So all those are listed on the site. You can peruse that at your leisure if you want to. But that seems to be all of the major stuff that they have implemented into this game. Now we do have release information as well. It is coming out on September 12th. It was going to be later in September originally, but they actually wound up moving that release date up by a few days. And it is coming out for the PS5, the Xbox Series, the Switch, and on PC via Steam. So on pretty much all platforms. Now this is the digital release. Limited Run Games is doing a physical release, which is up for pre-order now. The pre-orders for the physical version actually close on August 25th. So if you want to nab that, you got a few weeks left. It's $45 for the basic version, I believe. And then they're also doing a special cheerleader edition, which is $150. But it is pretty cool. It comes with a Juliet statue, which, if I didn't just spend a shitload of money on the Xbox 360 store before it closed last month, then I would maybe jump on this version just to get that statue, even more so than the game. But financially, that's probably going to be something I end up having to pass on this time. Which, as for me personally, I am actually still kind of on the fence about getting this game. I don't really know if I'm going to or not. On the one hand, I would like to have it just for collection reasons. I am a huge fan of the game. I would also kind of like to support Dragami Games because they do appear to be at least trying their best to do right by this game and do right by the fans. They seem like they actually give a shit and aren't just, trying to pinch out a turd to make money off of it. So, I would like to support them and their efforts. But on the other hand, if you're like me and you're someone who already owns the original release of the game, there isn't really a huge amount of stuff here that jumps out to me to make Repop a must-have. All the new additions, the new costumes and stuff are nice, but nothing about it seems like it's such a drastic difference from the thing that I already have that it's something that I have to rush out and immediately get a hold of right now. Now, the soundtrack thing is really a sticking point to me. That is really affecting my decision a lot because that soundtrack not being there just really hurts the game, in my opinion. I've talked about that already. But that was such a memorable part of the original release that it being replaced with these generic tunes it just isn't the same. Which it is going to be on Steam. If you get it on PC, I'm sure someone will end up making a mod that adds those licensed songs back in. So if you're going to go that route, then it probably won't be an issue. They might even be able to make a mod to add those, crossover costumes back in too. Who knows? So if you're willing to deal with Steam's horseshit and take that route, it might be a better option. But if you do want to get a physical copy on your console of choice, then obviously you won't be able to take advantage of that. Now, if you're a person who doesn't have the original release of this game, and you do really want to play it, Repop does sound like a decent option to be able to do so. The original copies of this game can be somewhat pricey. They're not the best prices I've ever seen, which they're not the worst either, to be honest. The 360 version, I think, tends to be available for slightly cheaper than the PS3 version, but neither one is exactly a steal. So if you don't want to go through the expense and the trouble of tracking down an original copy of the game on PS3 or 360, and potentially hardware to go with it if you don't already have it, there is no way to get the original release digitally without selling the 7 Cs, of course. So if you want an easy, convenient way to be able to play this game, Repop definitely does sound like a legitimate option for that. But if you have access to the original, I'm not seeing any huge reason to jump on this. So, you can look at all the facts and make the decision that suits you the best. But as for me, I'll think about it. I'm kind of leaning towards it just because it's Lollipop Chainsaw, and I do want to support Dragami Games. But I'll think about it and see what I wind up doing. But yeah, you can make the choice for yourself whether you think that this remaster looks right for you or not. But anyway, I guess that's all I got to say, so lots of luck to you and yours.